Hello, I am Ish, the author of this document. Before we start, I wanna give a shout out to the Breaking Copyright, the YouTube channel that give us free background, free beautiful soothing background music. Um, my document was translated to audio through zamzar.com. None of those people are. It's a free and a free service to translate your audio to AI generated voice. Uh, uh, the picture for this book is provided by Pixels, and this picture itself is uploaded by Mike Bird. I hope this small book will be of helpful to you, or at least a joyful experience. It is a book about work, and I know it's not the most sexy topic, but it is a topic that most of us, at least the working class, spend all or most of our life doing. So there is a lot to learn from work, and I hope you find it helpful and inspiring. And let's get started.
In the early 2000s, I was having a deep philosophical yet typically trivial conversation about education and whether that endeavor was worth it and whatnot. As I was trying to prove some point, my partner remarked that all my examples come from work and jobs I had. The minute that fact was pointed out, I realized that is maybe true that I, like many others, had spent most of my life working. Even though I never thought of myself as a factory worker, fast food worker, lab, or an office worker. It is a fact that I have played all these roles at one point or another in my life. Not just I was affected by all these experiences, but overlooking what I had learned from work, results in missing out on a great deal of wisdom. For as we get older, at least for most of us, naturally we tend to work in more than one place and as a result meet and see and interact with many people and situations. Yet what I have learned about myself, others, and companies can be useful. Well, in this project I will go down memory lane and recall things that I had seen, heard, and participated in my many years as a worker. My goal in this project is to briefly talk about the various job types and the differences between them, the unwritten rule for both success and doom in the work life and the cost of seeking a better opportunity. I will also perhaps list some amusing memories that highlight my experience as a worker and hopefully prove a point. In many ways this is a worker memoir. A little background information can always be helpful, and in that spirit, I will start by saying that I worked in more than one job, in more than one country and city. I also worked in different settings, like working in the countryside and in urban sites. I also spent more than a decade working as what is labeled as a non-skilled work and made a change in my 30s to become a skilled worker with companies that paid a little more and provided some kind of benefits. Now, with this boring introduction out of the way, let's ask questions and try to find an answer to this puzzle of life. Note before we start. In this project I will try to stay away from statistics, article citings, and journals. I will attempt to lay my experience as a worker and my point of view. This is a personal effort to reflect on the what's and why and how I feel that is not scientific but is a valid and important point of view that each of us see life and experience wisdom from. To prove this point I can bring the example that many people living in America have experienced hardship even in so-called good economic growth, and any person who lived in the States knew this or experienced this, and I think it will be both boring and uninteresting to quote an article only to prove a point that is easy to prove and is considered a common knowledge. After all, this is a reflection about my experiences and what I deduced from my experiences. Not to fail to mention the benefit of not making this text too long and making you the reader get lost in boredom. What is the right job for me? Like most short open-ended questions, this question is very hard to answer. Perhaps this involves three elements. Like pay and investment cost, for example, in order to go to school, capital is needed to get potentially more pay, yet even that may or may not happen. Desired field of work, what do you like to do for a living? Last is your age, which will affect both your ability to achieve and thrive in a job field and your ever-changing desire and goal of the work life. Pay and investment cost. For most of us, in order to get a better paying job, we are required to get an education, which often means that we must spend money on that education, yet is having a skill can be helpful? Now I can answer this question as yes, but not necessary. What do I mean by that? Well, I will say if you know someone, and that seems to be the largest opportunity door you need to get a good job, everything comes as secondary. I used to work as a lab technician in this large publicly traded company, and one of my co-workers, a person that did not have any training in lab work, and was not even interested in doing any work, and who made $3 an hour more than I did, and the company paid for his schooling for the last many years, plus the fact that that person, and others, tended to come late and left early, and not to fail to mention taking many 1-hour breaks every day. Also, in the time that he was in the lab, he did only one task a day and remain watching darts tournaments, and I even witnessed many times he gets caught by the supervisor doing this, but never once that was an issue that impact that person's security or advancement. All that was because the person mom was up there in the company, and the goal of our supervisor seems to make her son happy. We don't all have it that easy, but what aggravated me in that job was not how much work I had to do, but the fact that as I was doing work, I had to endure that very same person complaining about the job. Note on training. This is a note for those who are trying to figure out the right career. Having a hard or tough career path have nothing to do with having a satisfying career. Often satisfying careers are hard and challenging to achieve. So please note that you will most likely have to put an effort to achieve and be good at your chosen career. Another side note. Now this story mentioned above can serve as a segue to the other skill that you need beside training, in order to keep a job. I call this workplace wisdom, and what I mean is how to navigate stress and BS of the workplace. Going back to the story above, I can say that company was a good place for me for almost 5 years, because it gave me pay, benefits, and I left the company in a better position financially than when I entered it, not to fail to mention the many good people I met during that time. All of that was true despite the unfairness in both treatment and pay and recognition. Looking back, I think, if I was a younger person then I would probably quit the job in the first week, but sadly I can say I had many bad jobs already, and I knew by that time that I can quit any time, but I should choose the right time. Also I knew that from experience that quitting a job on principle must be for a good enough reason. What I mean by this is that you should immediately leave a job that harmful to others or do what you believe as an amoral sin, if I oblige to use this religious term. I remember my first lab job. I was attempt to hire, and when that turned out attempt forever, I end up giving my 2 weeks, yet here I was weeks later without a job and had to take classes and student loans just to be able to supplement paying my bills, and the only job I was able to get was a daily labor, a minimum wage job that did not cover the rent most of the time, as well as paying back extra loans for many years, and in case you wondering, that state of limbo lasted 2.5 years. The final point I can make about the importance of skill and work, what kind of skill vs what type of job you want, and how long and how expensive your endeavor can be. However, I have to point out the many angles to this problem. What I mean by the right job for many can be the earnings you may be able to generate out of your time and money and emotional investments. The right job also means a career you like to have, and that is a harder problem, because how you supposed to like a certain kind of work when you don't know what it is really like to be a worker of a certain trade? For a guy who had experience changing careers, I can confirm that it is never even close to what you expect. So, what to do? I say look at what a certain career you can do and be open that it will be different, most likely very different than you think. The final note on this question perhaps is if you want to do certain job, it is important that your passion don't lead you to defeat. What I mean by this is that you should be honest with yourself about your assessment of your ability and the drive you possess to achieve that goal. I am not saying you need to lower your expectation or give up about your large dreams, but while I was in school I met a girl that had hard time passing simple math and general chemistry, yet she wanted to be a medical doctor. 12 years later she was still trying. She was maxed up on loans, and had moved to more than one school in pursuit of a dream. Now that is a completely okay thing to do. After all, people waste so many years using destructive habits, yet to me that is a high price to pay. I myself spent time and money try to be a nurse for example, but quickly realized that career change was not what I wanted, and I think that having age and some experience helped me do so and move on to the next adventure. I lost some money and time, but my loss was limited. To summarize this point, it is often not what you know but who you know. We are all gifted with different skills, and we all should be realistic to our current situations. Side notes on training. In many technical fields, like nursing, medical labs, wastewater treatment to name a few, certification is a must. I found that these types of jobs tend to pay more than that of jobs that require similar level of college or vocational training. I worked as an industrial lab person, and I can say comparing medical lab pay is substantially higher to that in a chemistry/biology lab, especially at the starting pay range without experience. My first lab job paid me $12 an hour, and when I went and became certified as a water treatment person, which my education as a laboratory technician was crucial, my pay increased to $18 starting wage within a month of employment. Prove to me that certifications can be a useful tool to boost your pay potential. Age and our ever-changing circumstance and desire. Changing and adapting to the work life is a very important skill in my opinion. Change perhaps is the only constant in life. The economic situation, technology, wars, and migrations, all factors that can result in you being uprooted from your current situation and certainly your job. Yet for most people change tends to come due to age and health. As for myself, I can say that I dealt with many of the forces of change, but definitely find it harder to adapt to these changes as I am older and less healthy. For example, when I was 30 years old, despite having training and work experience, I found myself scraping on the verge of homelessness, saved by the fact that I was able to do daily labor work. Luckily, I was both willing to work and able to work. I definitely doubt that I will be able to dig ditches and work under the sun for 10 hours a day or dig hard frozen earth at -10 degrees at my current age and state of health. Health is a true blessing indeed. I can't imagine how I would fare if I was not able physically to do these jobs. Age and choosing a career. Your ability to do work will be affected with your age and health, not just physically but also mentally. In theory you will get experience and you will be able to do your work more effectively, yet technological advancement, mental and physical peaks, sharpness, and stamina will change as well, especially in the later stages of most people's careers. One of my current jobs that I hold, in the time of writing this note, is an office job, and one of my colleagues is a woman in her 70s that I can't imagine she can physically work in most factories or restaurants. In many ways she is lucky enough to have a job she can do if she still wants or needs to work. I worked in manufacturing for most of my life, and my observation to myself and other colleagues is that of a physical decay over time. So, choosing or changing to a much suitable work can be a good strategy, especially if the career move came not too late. The wrong work can be detrimental to your farewell. Dealing with people. Perhaps the most challenging and rewarding thing about any job is meeting people that you would never meet in real life, apart from the few psychos, toxic, and all-around bad people. You will meet future friends, and people that will enrich your life, and perhaps you may meet the love of your life. Yet what I want to emphasize here, if to be observant, is how people deal with life and its strange situations. I always for the most part kept myself professional and private and not involved in people's lives, but I also did observe and listen sometime to those that I met at work, and I can say I did learn so much about myself as I reflect how I differ or why I agree to what a particular individual say or do not. Perhaps the most important reason to be visual about what type of people fate of employment put you in is for you to be able to navigate the workday, Of course some people are too good at this skill of that end up making strides in their career. This also can be the reason that others, the unfortunate, can end up with a miserable job or a dead-end job. As for me, I found myself like those on the losing side for the most part, mainly because of my choice to not engage too much with co-workers and because I was and still different from most people I worked with. However, over the years I ended up getting better in dealing with people and with the hand I got dealt. Before we get into the subject of human drama, let me start by saying that in principle a job or a program in school should be a safe place and that all people should be treated in fairness and dignity. There are laws even in primitive unsophisticated countries that provide some protections. Also there are cultural mores built in all cultures. Those laws and rules are not exclusive and it is people and institutions that should provide those protection. I am sure that I am not the only one that left a job solely because I felt I was not treated fairly. Now that I said all this, here are some tricks I used to control situations and deal with people. Don't let them pull my leg to a conversation about a subject that is not job related and that I don't want to get in with that particular person, and the simple tricks are not to talk about anything that can lead to that conversation that you don't want to talk about. I plan what to say, not to talk to the other person in case that person is the issue, except if this is a work related, and doing so without creating the feeling that you're mad at that person. Answer a direct question that you don't want to answer with a clarification question. For example, someone comes to ask about your opinion about a political view that you don't want to talk about. You can say, "Why my opinion matter?" Or "Why you are thinking about these things?" Or even "What you did last weekend." I found early on that people who are nosy and like to ask questions, don't like to answer any. In some situations, I can state this is not something I like to talk about. Remember, you have the right not to talk about anything personal or confidential, and if the situation gets bad you need to talk to HR or management. I remember a situation where a foreign supervisor used to come to talk religion to myself, who happened was not of that faith and not a religious person and not from the same country. And that I had to endure this harassment, and that was the intention of that supervisor. That company long gone and went out of business, but still I still recall that incident and imagine the crap that I had to go through. I never reported that person because I did not have faith in my employer to do anything about it, and I was in school at the time and did not want to end up losing my job due to an escalation of the situation and more harassment. I still debate if I made the right decision almost 20 years later from writing this note. The important truths about most job situations. Affirmation. Still remember, you have the right and should know those important truths about any jobs. No job is fair, but we should to make the best of it. If you are in a dangerous situation, get out of that particular job. Jobs comes and goes, and there is always something you can do about most situations. Finally, it is not your fault if you are being harassed or not treated fairly. Still, sometimes it is best if you leave a job than to spend fruitless effort fighting for a better situation. When I was in my early 20s, I worked in a factory that paid me close to minimum wage. That factory rated its employees in 3 levels, of which I was a level 3, the top level. I ran a crazy large machine by myself, and I was in charge of training other new employees. One day a new employee came to work, and I was the one training her. She mentions that she was only hoping that she will only be in this job until she would get a better paying job, because they only paid her $9.5 an hour, plus she would get another 50 cents after her 90 days. Now I was only making $7 an hour. So, a day later I went to the company production supervisor and asked him if I could get paid as much as the new trainee. The guy simply smirked and stated that the $7/hour rate I got hired for is set and he can't do anything to help me. As a result, when I walked downstairs from the manager's office, I found myself unable to go back to the production area. I clocked out and left. It felt like a stupid thing to do at that time because I had no income besides a part-time daily labor job I had, but as I look back at that situation now, I can say I am proud of myself for standing up for myself. Here are some examples about bad things on the job. You can work at a job where you find yourself bullied, teased, discriminated against, and or put in physical or legal danger, and you know that you are at danger, and the question then is this: should I quit now, find a job and quit, sue the employer, or and fight for my rights? Now it is you alone who must figure out which strategy you should partake. Employee 1 is called the faggot and have an effigy of him hanging on his locker door. That employee in this case left work and sued the employer. This story was told to me from his former co-workers. They said that he could not take a joke, yet some of those employees had to tell on each other as an investigation took place. But how that employee do it and prove the harassment? I was told that the police were involved at some point, and to me that is evidence that the employee did not rely on company policy alone, because they will simply destroy all evidence to protect themselves. Indeed, that employer tell a new hire that they should not call law enforcement but a designated safety and security person who alone will make that call. Example 2, that employee, myself, being harassed by the supervisor who come to him and want to argue religion. That employee chose to endure that harassment, but was it the right call? Little background about that company and time. That employee was a part-time student, had a family to take care of financially and was a minority of one, meaning he had no ties to other groups. That company employ a large number of Vietnamese, Iraqis, Sudanese, and white Americans. Most of these people were wonderful people, but for that individual, the outsider, must have felt that he would not get the backing of others, and perhaps did not feel it was worth the trouble. He was there to get paid, and sabotaging the balance of work and school was not worth the effort. What work can do for you? Let's talk about what work can do for you. First, it will give you income. Perhaps this is not the sexiest part of the conversation about work, but how much you make can be a factor in many things. The more money, the more power. When I was in my teens and early 20s, I spent many years working 2 jobs. Of course, as an unskilled worker without connections, I spent years working in fast food or low-paying temp factory jobs. I remember I used to work at both McDonald's and Burger King, and I worked at BK in the morning and I closed at McDonald's, and customers were often amused to the fact that I was wearing the BK hat at McDonald's. I also worked as a temp worker, daily labor, in a hotel laundry. And I for the most part kept most of these jobs for more than a year, but even with being a good worker I never was able to do more than the minimum of my goals. I was able to pay my bills, but often I was behind on bills if an emergency hits. I remember an attractive girl that I had crush on gave me her number, but I didn't call her because I could not afford to take her out on a decent date, and as I know that she was in college while here I was perhaps not in her league. That was a memory that I think many young poor kids can relate to. A painful memory indeed. I have to note that I also was helping my family, for my dad had passed, but across the country people find themselves in situations where a meager wage alone can result in limitation on future dreams, whether it is the fact that you have too much responsibility like kids with young siblings to take care of, or you live in an extremely expensive area, single mother or father, or can't get a job. I view this situation similar to that of being in jail, especially for a young person. No matter what I would achieve in my 30s, 40s, and beyond will never be a remedy to those lost years, yet life is not fair. The more money you make in a job, the more you can make in promotion and the better potential job you may get. When I was about to finish paying my student loans, my job at the time went out of business, and perhaps as a result of my paranoia of not being able to find a job quickly and the fact that I wanted to keep earning and finishing my loans burden, I threw myself in a job that paid me $6 less an hour. I kept that job for many years, around 5 years. During that time I got promoted many times as well as got the yearly raise, and yet I was still making less than what I made in the previous job. Perhaps it is good to be a little choosy, especially when changing jobs and if you still have your job. I found that taking a lower paying job can result in hindering not just your immediate earnings but your potential future earnings. If your work pays you good money, this is also the way to feel valued by many people. Feeling accomplishment and feeling enabled to do other things in life. For example, it was only after I got situated and earned enough money as a lab person then other ideas came into play for me, like thoughts of buying a home or investing and even changing career. Before I thought of improving myself, but that was more from a harder place to dream, because I had nothing yet I was spending and borrowing in the hope to improve my life. Now I know this is how I thought about it, and my experience was not atypical to a young person that don't care how or who pay for the school. I used to be this working young guy that know that he was not the smartest person and had lower self-esteem, and my fight was not just how to pay for school and books and how to manage time, but to fight the inner doubt that I can or will make it. As for the second time, it was not an easier dream to achieve, but I was already more at peace with who I am and as a result had more confidence for the most part. As for school, I was able to pay as I went with not much austerity. I never made the 100K at those times, but still I was able to do a lot for myself. For those readers that have never experienced this, a lack of money can mean so much hardship. Of course, depending on how much less you have, there is that of relative poverty and there is that of absolute. Having no capital can impact you of things you need to do, for example getting medical help vs feeding your family, doing with less, going without food. Also, can impact you when it comes to psychological view on life, knowing how fragile life can lead to either a positive realistic view and or a negative feeling on insecurity. I know I have both the good and bad impact to that experience. A job, in my opinion, should be looked at as an experience that can teach any person who chooses to learn valuable lessons about life, and about oneself. All that knowledge can teach us about what we need, who to avoid, and how to deal with situations, and mostly what is the best job for someone, and what one can handle in a job, because choosing a job solely based on earning is not the best way. For example, if over the years you found that a job like customer service is not the job for you, then perhaps you should avoid applying to these kinds of jobs, and I think that most people do that after one too many bad job experiences. However, not many people can see what the worst or best thing about a job was and try to apply that knowledge to help them in their next career. Another valuable lesson, being at work, is it can teach us about the society which we live in. I find myself interested and intrigued and fascinated by the stories, true or fabricated, the way people act and the why they do so. Not just people can teach us about the places which we live in, but the how the structure of a company, school, government, work, the system, can definitely show us what are the values we embrace, both good and bad. I was fascinated about how people deal with their imperfect lives and the lesson that can teach. For example, in a war zone, when people have to face the fact that they have little control over their lives, a phenomenon, which I call, the imaginary escape, happens, in which the person is more in control of the situation. Here is a story a sorry person who lived in a war zone tells. He was on a plane that happens to end up with a hole in the cockpit during flight, in which he used his body to plug the hole for the dangerous journey to safety. Now that person told me this beautiful but unrealistic story for one reason: to make himself feel in control. For I and him were in a violent country that have no rules or rights to poor people, and perhaps his fib or story was showing him as a hero and a person in charge. When I moved to the States, I find people tell less elaborate fibs, especially people in better jobs or professional jobs, and I think that due to the fact that those are people more in charge of their situations and their living arrangements, so intense daydreams are not needed. What you do for a living can have a great effect on your life, not just pay-wise. Before the internet and dating site, people in most modern societies used to meet at school, church, or work. Now most of us heard that you should not date at work. I think the right thing to say is that you should not harass anyone at work, but if you to find a potential mate, someone that you see yourself partnered with, you should take the opportunity, providing that you know the risk of having to leave your job, especially if a potential failed relationship make it difficult for you to stay at work, or in some cases the employers have rule that prevent spouses to work in the same area. That being said, if you do not take chance, you may end up missing out on your potential soulmate. I know I may had. Another effect a job has on your life is simply how a certain job makes you feel, and what a job brings out of you. This is a very important and often ignored issue or factor. We all hear that some person went crazy and killed some co-workers, but often in the media, it seems that the sole blame falls on the person committing the crime, but perhaps some of the blame should be involved the organization's or the employer's culture. I remember one time a co-worker went and complained about harassment to HR, and the response of my employer at the time was to make us watch a video of how to spot a potential violent employee, and my manager asked other co-workers to watch that same employee who did complain about harassment. In this case, my co-worker eventually left the job. but if he was an out-of-control person, those provoking actions could cause potential harm to any person who worked in that organization, including myself. That was an extreme example, but more often the common side effect of a stressful job result is a stressed person, which means a person is less productive and not fully engaging and mostly negative. This situation is definitely not good for your health and for all aspects of your life. A lady once told me that she left her husband after many years because he was so negative and stressed by his job. I do imagine that many divorces and perhaps alcohol abuse is tied to a stressful job. With nowadays, workers can utilize online reviews as well as personal connections to screen some large employers in their area. The nuggets of wisdom. As I stated earlier, being observant for yourself and others, listening to what people say and watching what they do, is an amazing learning opportunity. Thinking about what is behind those actions and stories is the key to so much wisdom. Let's look at an act of coworker being racist. Example: Worker A state all people of the same ethnic group are lazy bums, thugs, and are simply no good takers. Worker B state that those people are inferior stupid animals. Then let's listen to the story of each. Worker A was attacked and robbed by a person of a certain group. Worker B only hang out with ultra-right groups. Both are constantly watch racist video and post. Now let's think a little how those two people differ. Worker A had an emotional trauma, so his dislike come not from the head but the heart. In many ways, if Worker A see that persons of that group also suffer attacks by violent criminals too, his sympathy may help in a change of heart, while Worker B may need a more intervention, because changing a mind may often be harder to do. I brought this generic example to view, in order to highlight, that trying to understand an action may help you better assess the situation, especially at the workplace. I once had encountered a very hostile co-workers to me, and it was hard to deal with her, and every time I had to deal with her I felt bad. Yet when I learned that she was in a very abusive relationship with a foreigner that left her partially disabled, and that knowledge alone did allow me to see that her behavior was not about me, it was simply that I perhaps looked like her significant other. I do forgive her, but I don't think would have done so if she was just prejudiced against me just because she happens to believe in some superiority view of the races of the world. To move or not to move? When should you leave your job? If it happened that you work in a dangerous job, that of a job that pays so little or does not pay you enough, then perhaps that is a simple decision to make, because it is usually easier to find a job that is better than an awful job, and what you have to lose depend on your situation is still not as much as leaving a stable good paying jobs. Yet before I go on arguing about the reasons that I found to compel me to leave a good enough job, let me talk about the few times that I held on to very bad jobs just simply because I had not many options that were better. Holding on fire that can burns you and disfigure you is the analogy that I think of when I think of these situations, that I had to go to a job that barely pay, and be treated unfairly, and harassed, yet I kept these jobs because I had no choice. I had to take care of myself and family. I had not much options due to the fact that I had no education and no connections to get a better job. Indeed, I could not get any job, perhaps due to the fact that the job market was tight. I remember one year, I think 2002, I had 3 part-time jobs, all at minimum wage or close to it. Each job was a classic bad job, yet I kept going there, and I kept applying to others. 373 applications in that year alone. Indeed, it was in the next year where I was able to find one job that was better, and I was able to go down to 2 jobs. Yet that experience had a profound effect on me. I can say that it reinforces the trait of holding on and being patient, but it was a reminder for me that I don't have full autonomy, and that my willing to be a good worker and very good work ethics did not mean much. I was reminded of my hopelessness and weakness and limitations. These feelings take their toll and leave their marks. But what if a job is a decent one? Why I felt I need to leave it? There are 2 reasons why I decided to leave good enough and tolerable jobs. The first reason was that of a personal reason, like I decided to go back to school. Yet thinking closely about these decisions, I found that often there are other reasons that pertain to each of those particular job that made me make such a decision. For example, I used to be a lab technician, and I recall that my first job as a technician paid me at that time the most I ever made. My co-workers were nice to me, and so was my boss. yet I was not satisfied working there because I was attempt to hire. And I never got the chance to get the full-time position I was promised, and I did not want to wait because I had a slight phobia of being a temp, because I was a temp worker for few years during the end of 90s and early 2000s. Despite the fact that I was very good worker, even awarded the Employee of the Year in one company. Another time I left a job because I was interested in someone and did not want to be there as she found her perfect lover, even though I really wished her the best, but of course did not want to be there to see it. In both cases I brought there were more reasons why I made my decision to leave. The second reason I left OK jobs was unfairness and feeling that I was not paid as good as people that did the same work. Let's call this reason leaving a good paying comfortable bad job. For example, the job that saved me from financial ruins was a job as a water treatment technician. Because of that job I was able to pay a large portion of my student loans and other major bills and financial commitments, so I always be thankful to have had that job. But I was treated like garbage from workers that were worried that I was there to take their jobs, the treatment, and disregard my simple safety need as well as the unfair pay. Not a surprise that I end up leaving that job the moment I found a comparable job. A job, especially one that is held for long time, should give you more substantial satisfaction, more so than that of what a monetary value can be. Matching your skills. The person that does what he or she loves never had a job in their lives. This common saying often rings true. Yet for many, knowing what you like to do is not easy. I found that the best way to answer this question is by first to complicate this question even more. So, let's start by asking the whys and what and how. To tackle this issue, let's ask ourselves these questions. What you are good at? That question can be asked in many ways. What subject you are good in school? What attribute you have that is good in certain job? For example, are you a person that like to physically move, or are you a people person, and are these attributes make you good in one profession other than the other? Why you like a certain job? Humans, rational as they like to believe, are emotional creatures that do things mainly based on how they feel. Answering this question perhaps very helpful to decide what jobs you don't like. Answering that question also may teach you about yourself. What are your future goals in life? This is perhaps not the most question I will dwell on, because I find that my priorities changed in time. For example, in the near future I hope that I will be able to work less hours as well, and perhaps I have to accept less pay as a result, for I like to stay in the workforce, but my priorities have changed and I like to do few other things beside work. Also, my career have less value now to me as a younger person. When I was in my 30s I was concerned about the fact that I needed a better job to pay my bills and get out of debt. Happily, less so now, but I do rate a job now more so based on benefits and whether a certain job fits my lifestyle. Important note. If I look back on my strategy, what are the mistakes and opportunities that I think I should have done? Perhaps dreaming small is the one mistake that I made, specifically when I was younger or even in my 20s. I also don't believe in having unrealistic expectations in someone's abilities, but I wish I did allow myself to try for more. Another note. There are always other factors that determine your success in a job or a career. Things can happen that are out of your control. Things like having a sick child or being affected by illness yourself and not having the right support, whether that is from your work or at home. Other things may be partially out of your control but demand action that may jeopardize your employment situations, like being a witness against your employer in a case or telling the truth about some illegal or unlawful practices at work that will affect you. In both cases you need to do what you think is right. Otherwise, you may get yourself in more problems or you may lose self-respect since you did not do the right thing. You do not have to have what is deemed an important job to be faced with these dilemmas. If you live and work long enough you may experience these situations. No job or dream is worth selling out on what you think is right. Facts about different fields. As a person who worked in many fields, here are my 2 cents on each field of work based on what I observed and experienced. Different jobs offer you different experiences and pay. People and cultures in different field are usually unique to that vocation and area, but before I start, I have to say that people are people and there is the good and bad in all regardless of the field of work. yet every field of work is dominated by people from a unique cultures and educational and economic background and perspectives. Food worker / retail. Fast food and restaurant worker. Like most people starting in the job market, more than 25 years ago, I start working as a fast food worker and a dishwasher. I had to work 2 jobs at the same time because of the low pay, yet the nature of the flexibility of work allowed me to be able to work 2 jobs even though I had no car. The fact that I had no car and no expenses due to the car allowed me the opportunity to make it to the next step. My advice for a person in this situation is to live close to work and get 2 jobs or cut down on costs, perhaps due to rent. In some cases, people can qualify for assistance, and they can afford to work 1 job. Jobs like that are only sustainable jobs at best, good for student or people that have support. You will never have saving working fast food work, and God forbid if you have illness or emergency you will be in trouble, especially if you have no other means of support. I know I am thankful that I was young and healthy during that time and I had good work ethics as a young guy. Fast food / restaurant fun facts. Fun fact about those days, working there I chose to just work 2 jobs and save to get a very old car, which took me about a year, but that was my way out to go and work in a factory. Others I seen are people trying to arrange their lives to fit the fact to such a job that pay little by getting roommates or live with their families. Often that job was a transitional job while being in school. Others try to go up the corporate ladder. Culture of fast food / restaurant place. Perhaps this type of field suffers from the issue of high turnover. You can have a full shift in the morning, and you often notice that co-workers quit before the end of the shift. As for managers, my observation, if my memory serves me well, is that of quick ascent followed by an even faster descent, mostly due to the fact that the person find it too stressful to be stuck as an assistant manager, with only few dollar above the minimum wage. In other cases it will be a person that get involved with other manager to start the managerial ascent only to get harassed after the relationship ends. I want to stress that these kinds of jobs are so important yet so undervalued. Working with restaurants and stores allowed me to face the facts and truth about my limitations and strengths when it comes to dealing with all types of people. Many people from different backgrounds come to and work at these places. When I worked at a thrift store, I witnessed and was aware of how people can use their work to break the rules and even hurt others. I remember my store manager marking prices down on items that she wants to buy. Co-workers gang on another co-worker to say he was making threats just because he was simply different. I do not know if it was the fact that I got older, but by the age of 23 I started to see the faults of people and the system which we all supposed to operate. Life no longer had the optimistic appeal, in part due to my early work experience. Sometimes I think that those jobs that are so-called unskilled and can be filled by most people in a competitive job market may push people to be reactive to their immediate situation where people will be tested. Most want to get out and no one want to be there. Factory work. Factories are the backbone in the modern economies. In my opinion, factories don't just provide useful goods. Factory work usually offer people with the opportunity to earn a full-time job. I was able to pay my rent and most my expenses when I started a career as a factory worker. I still had to work part-time jobs due to the fact that I never was a lucky enough person to work in high-paying factory opportunities, and I had more responsibility than the average young person, but nevertheless factory work allowed me to get a full-time hours and paid me a little more the minimum wage. I was 20 years old when I started working as a factory worker, and in many ways, I am still a factory worker well into my 40s where I am a lab technician, but I'm mainly going to talk about the unskilled or low-skill factory work in this section. Strange and unnatural is what I can describe factory work at best. Here is a place made of concrete and is fitted with various machines and contraptions. You go into the factory and clock in, and in many settings, you simply become a part of the machinery, often not able or allowed to stop except for a break or to go to the bathroom. Even though factory work provided me with a stable income, I still wonder at what effect both psychologically and physically was the effect of working in this unnatural setting. Isolation and stress, and physical damage is a price all of us that end up working in factories will have to deal with. I have massive damage and pain to my hands, feet, back due to the fact that I spent years standing on my feet, often doing repetitive work non-stop. Yet perhaps worst damage was that of a psychological effect. I did work in total isolation without talking to any person for long periods of time and for many years. Add to that the fact stress of losing my work and the ever-diminishing pay due to larger macroeconomical changes, and here you are, older, unskilled and isolated, a truly a lonely place to be. A factory worker, how I become, and who I identify myself to be. The good thing about being a worker is the fact that you feel productive, no matter how trivial and unusual the product you made is. Here you are starting your shift with a crude supply and leaving your jobs with a product, yet there is always the depressing fact that the next day you will come to do the very same thing making the same product, a cycle that seems never to end. Like being on a hamster wheel. There are few types of factory work. In general, there is assembly line work and that of the machine operator. Each requires different skill levels. The assembly line work is perhaps a more complex environment. Here you are tied to others, managed by a line leader. Everyone must work in nuisance, logistics must be provided, and workers must become one machine, and the machines in the line are only in part, the others are the line workers. As for machine operating, this is a form of work I can describe as man and machine. You must be totally independent, running the machine, often fixing it on your own. This form of work requires you to challenge yourself and be as efficient as you can be. When I worked in a letter shop, for example, I used to plan every move I made, like when to stock the crude product of paper inserts, how long I should spend time sorting and packaging the mail before I have to stock the machine again, even tweaking the machine often as it runs, at what speed I should run the machine to get my required percentage, all that while to try to stay safe. I can say that I did enjoy machine operating much more than line work, perhaps because I did not want my day affected by others. Let me reflect on how it is like to work in a factory. What is the strange and unique aspect of working in the factory, that unnatural environment of concrete and steel? First, the feeling that you are just a number and you are nothing more than a replaceable tool or machine part is amplified in a factory setting. The joke is that your factory may care about numbers in terms of profit and efficiency way more than that of most employees, which make you rather less than a number instead of a number. Long gone the days of companies that took care of their employees, where an employee might spend all their working life in that job knowing and trusting that they are getting paid enough and having the ability to enter the middle class. In my generation, most factory work is only a job that lack both security and fairness, largely due to the fact that most companies are not union-based and that the local labor laws are hedged in the employer favor. In my opinion, most of the factories I worked at, if not all, had a problem in retaining and keeping employees, and the minute the economy start to sour, the indiscriminate firing of employees start. In 2007 and 2008 I used to work in this letters shop factory. That factory was not making enough profit to satisfy the investment group that owned it, and the corporate decision came that company will liquidate itself by selling part of the business and closing the other part, even though we were told they were making profit overall. During that time, especially the starting stage of liquidation, the company started only allowing people to work just few hours a day but did not lay them off or cut their hours enough so the workers were become able to get benefits like unemployment. In some cases, some people made less than $100 every week after you take gas money away from the budget. I remember that I and most workers had to carpool in order to save money, and I remember that I felt both guilty and fortunate for the fact that I was able to work more hours than most just because I was a quality assurance person and I was still needed to be at work more so than the typical machine operator. Still, I was walking on eggshells at that time, not wanting to upset my superiors due to the fact that the company was trying to fire or push people to quit, so to save on any benefit it'd have to pay when the planned time for shutdown came. Let's talk about the good aspects of working in a factory. First, you don't need any experience of special training to do factory work. Here you are on a line doing few tasks in a timed manner. The only requirement you need is that you are healthy enough to do the tasks and that you have the discipline and willing to do the tasks again and again as fast as the machine or line is running. Of course, companies often run you to the maximum speed and efficiency. So that to say factory work is not easy, and most people that end up working in factories for a long time are physically spent and often suffer from injuries and physical limitations. Machines in factories seem to get better care than the people that run them. Nevertheless, most able-bodied people can do most factory work. Another good aspect of factory work that it is job that gives people benefits, even in the late 1990s and early 2000s, which in my opinion was a time of a weak and unchecked labor market partly due to the rapid job move overseas. Most factories I worked for provide some kind of health insurance, and 401k retirement that if you was fortunate and worked as a full-time. However, most factories had a large portion of their factory workers hired as temporary workers where they did not provide them with any benefits. Factory work can sometimes offer advanced training. I was able to be offered the opportunity to learn how to MIG weld when I was 20 years old. That allowed me to earn about $2 an hour more than my wage as an assembly line worker. In some cases, if you get the opportunity, you may end up working as a maintenance person without education, which results in much higher earning. Also, many large companies allow you to be reimbursed for education. However, I find these programs to be distributed in an unjustly or in an unfair way. For example, two employees may apply to a tuition reimbursement the employer may accept of applicant and reject another. Nevertheless, it is good ideas to consider these opportunities if it is offered. Working in a factory in general offer employees a full-time hour. The work is in general fixed in time. For example, you are mostly assigned to a shift or fixed hours. Even when working overtime, you still work in a specific time frame, which allows you to plan your life around your shift. Yet unlike other full-time work, factory work usually offers first and second and even third shift, while more other full-time jobs, like office work, is just made of a single day shift. The shift works maybe not offer the greatest hours in many cases. The flexibility is only limited to the shift hour, which make that kind of work not suited to full-time students and single parents with younger kids. Skilled work. What is skilled work and what is the most important aspect of such work? According to Google, skilled work requires a special type of training. However, in my opinion, not all skilled acquired for a job result in making you a skilled worker. Many jobs require food service permits, for example. Yet having such license does not make a fast food worker a skilled worker. Perhaps you can consider yourself a skilled worker if your job tasks are only able to be achieved with the help of a set of training and or with obtaining a license that in turn can only be achieved with special training. Not all skilled work is the same. Some fields you can be trained for a short period of time and almost everyone can achieve a minimum skill to do your work. Other skilled take more than a year to achieve, and not everyone would be able to pass an acquired standard for that skill. I have so far worked in a few types of settings that can be considered skilled work, for example, in a laboratory, in water treatment utility setting, and as a welder/maintenance person. Each skill was acquired in a different manner. As TIG welder/maintenance person, which I did not have to go for school to learn such skill but rather picked up the skills needed over a lifetime of work, I was paid for my time and did not have to pay for my training or supplies, and I end up making 20% more than what I was making as an unskilled assembly line worker. Training for the job was easy, but the work conditions were a little harder than the assembly line when it came to heat and dirt. I did enjoy working as a welder more than an assembly line worker. As a lab worker, I did it the hard way, acquired that skill by going to college. Yet to my surprise, I found that many people can work in a lab without a college degree or putting themselves in debt. That said, I would never have the chance to work in a lab setting if I did not go to school for that field. As a lab person, I end up making double the minimum wage eventually. Some places will give you additional in-house training for more than a year. I did lab work for many years and in different settings, and in that type of work, who you work for is as important as what skilled and experience you have. As a water treatment operator/maintenance, the skilled I had was acquired mainly through a license or certificate. However, my education in water science and chemistry was a great help to obtain that certification. Other skilled like welding and some mechanical works were obtained by accumulation of experience. I can't say that I had the ideal employer, but I say I made more money for that time. Having a skill does not immune you from working for a bad employer, and all the BS a person may experience in a non-skilled work are there in a skilled setting. Sadly, that is a fact of life, and we workers should try to navigate not just work field but good employers. White-collar jobs. I have to say my experience as an office worker can't be classified as a glamorous nor a lucrative job. For I never at least yet had that six-figure corner office position. Yet I can say that I came to find office work to be the strangest of all jobs that I had. Office work in a strange way is like that of low-tech factory work. You are assigned a task, usually the same tasks of few things you must repetitively do, like that of the machine operator, only in this case your machine is a computer in a paper file. Again and again, you keep doing the same thing all day until that known time at the end of the shift, where all of a sudden people in the office become unconsumed by the tasks that like the mindless job of machine operator. I spend lots of time explaining and describing the nature of different type of work and the experience of going to work, and all these points and lessons are important, yet, we should not lose focus of the fact that work is and should not be the most important part of any one person's life, for it is people in our lives like family and friends who add value to our existence, and it is our relationship to ourselves and being okay with who we are that in my opinion is the most important things that should matter. A person can have a job they don't like, but that can be a very okay thing if that person's priorities are set in a healthy manner. For example, a person can often be proud is doing hard labor work because he or she have done so to support their children. On the other hand, a person that pours all their energy into a career may find themselves with the feeling of emptiness and wastefulness. Understanding work and the effect it can have on our lives is the goal in my effort. Let work works for you and fit in the greater arch of your life. A job is no doubt a big part of our lives, and through it we can experience life. Please look at work as part of the experience of life and don't dismiss it as an unpleasant activity because you are living it and spending most of your time doing work. If life is made of fleeting moments, don't dismiss the biggest part of your life.